Well, it seems that when I made my video on how to install Windows 10 in VirtualBox, the sound wasn't on. I have to remake it. So let's get started. I'm going to be installing a trial version that I made from the ISO on the Windows 10 download page out of the media creation tool. I can start by clicking the new button here, or I could go over to machine and say new. It doesn't matter which one I choose, they have the same result. Up pops this guy here. I'm going to give my machine a name. I will call it Windows 10. Windows 10. I'll say that this is a 64-bit version. I'm going to install the Pro version, and I will even say that this is the 1903 version. Here is where the virtual machine is going to exist. Now, a virtual machine here is actually going to look like it's on its own hard drive, but it's not really on its own hard drive. It's a virtual hard drive, and all it really consists of is a giant file on the hard drive. But to VirtualBox, it will look like its own hard drive. I don't want to put it on my C drive. I'm going to presume that we are putting it on an external drive. So I'm going to click the down arrow here and say Other, and I'm going to choose my Mini Pro drive right here, which is an external USB drive that I have here, and I have a folder already called CIS140M, and I think I will put it here in this drive. So I'll just click Select Folder. Alright. Now, I am going to be installing Windows 10 64-bit. I'll click Next. Here is the amount of RAM that this particular machine is going to have. It's just like the amount of RAM, say, on my host machine, except my virtual think that this is the host machine. So 2 gigabytes here, which is 2048 megabytes, is okay. It's assuming, let's say that you have a laptop that only has 2 gigabytes on it. That's what it will look like. Now, if you have a machine, your host machine has quite a bit of memory, say it has 8 or 16 or 32 gigabytes of memory, you may want to give it 4 or 8 or more gigabytes. However, I'm just going to give it 2 to emulate what many students will be using. I do want to create the virtual hard disk now. Again, it's really not, it's going to look like a hard disk to my machine, but it's really just a big file on my system. But yes, I will go ahead and let it create it now. I do want to make it a VDI file, which is a VirtualBox version of a disk image. The VHD is one that Hyper-V uses, which is Windows 10 hypervisor, and then the VMDK is one used by VM Workstation, VMware Workstation. So I want to go ahead and use the VDI, which is, since I'm using VirtualBox here, which is the VirtualBox type of hard drive or a virtual drive. Dynamically allocated. Now, do I want this huge 50 gigabyte file, or whatever size I make it, do I want it to start out small and grow as I need it, or do I want to make it always 50 gigabytes? Well, I'm going to let it grow as I need it, so I will say dynamically allocated. Over here is the size that I want. Indeed, I want a 50 gigabyte file. And this will look like a 50 gigabyte hard drive to my virtual machine. Now you can see that it chose the folder I decided on, and then it made a folder within that folder that is named the same as the virtual machine name that I gave it, and then here's the actual virtual machine. It's always important to make sure that there is a folder, a separate folder for each virtual machine. Otherwise, all these files get intertwined with each other and tangled up with each other, and you could have several virtual machines all sharing the same folder, and then you can't tell which files go to which one. So it's good to let it make this extra folder in here so that you can keep them separate. Create a virtual hard disk now. Yeah, I don't want to make it later. Uh-oh, it just kind of went onto the next screen by itself. Yes, I'm going to let it create the hard disk now. There is one more change. Don't ask me why it did that, by the way. It just sort of took off on its own, but once I clicked next, it would have gone to here anyway. There is one other change that I want to make here that it doesn't set up by itself. I'm going to go ahead and click Settings for this machine and go down to System and then Processor. And you see right now it's only using one core for my processor. Well, on the machine I'm on right now, I actually have a 16-core processor. You may only have a 4-core or 2-core or 8-core, but one core is really going to make it a slow machine. So since I have quite a bit on mine, I'm going to go ahead and make it a 2-core, give my virtual machine a 2-core processor. And that will help speed things up a little bit when I have the thing running. And I'll go ahead and click OK on that. You can make that decision based on your machine and what you have available. Now I'll go ahead and click Start, and it will begin the installation. Now once the installation begins, excuse me, got a frog in my throat here. Once the installation begins, there will be several times I will pause the machine, or excuse me, pause the video while things catch up, so the thing won't be, this video won't be as long. This particular screen right here is asking, well, where is the installation file? Where's the ISO or the DVD or the USB that you're installing from? So I'm going to click this little folder over here, and it turns out that I actually put the ISO in that same folder where we're putting our virtual machine, on my Mini Pro drive on a CIS 140M folder, and there's the ISO file that I will be using. This is the source file that I'm installing from. It just looks like a DVD to VirtualBox. I'll go ahead and click Start, and it will begin the installation process. Alright, at this point I'm going to click the pause button on my video, and we're going to pause between each of these screens to shorten the video. This is the next screen that comes up. I just want to verify that all of these are the settings that I want, and click Next. And now I have an option of either repairing the computer, that this would be used by your, if you use a DVD or USB to repair a version of Windows that isn't working right. But in this case, I want to install a new one, so I click Install Now. Now remember, I said at the beginning I'm going to install a trial version, which means I do not have a product key. Well, I'm not stuck here, even though it's asking for a product key. I have this little guy down here. I don't have a product key. So if you're installing a trial version, such as one from the Media Creation tool, then this is the one you would use. I don't have a product key. And now I can choose which one I want. Windows 10 Pro, for example, is the one I want right now. You could use Education in this one, but I'm going to use Pro. Make sure it's a 64-bit machine over here, which it is. I'll click Next. Now I have to accept the license terms, so I'll go ahead and say I accept the license terms and click Next. At this screen I have two options. If I click the Upgrade, you would think that that would upgrade a currently running version, but this is a trick question. When I click it, it says, the upgrade option is not available. It says it's not available because I didn't boot this from within Windows. I booted it from the ISO file, which is the equivalent of a bootable DVD, and so I can't upgrade from here. But I do want to do a custom install, which is the same as a clean install. So I will click Advanced. I only have one drive. That's that 50 gigabyte drive that I created. Again, it's just really a file on a drive, but it pretends that it's a drive. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that. If I wanted to, at this point, I could create more drives. So for example, if I click New down here, I could say, well, I want 25,000 here, and apply that, and I would make additional drives on here, a 25 gigabyte drive, as well as some unallocated space left over. But I don't want to do that. I want to delete all of these and make them all one big unallocated drive here, just like that. and I'm going to use that and click Next, and this is the drive we're going to install it on. Alright, off it goes. We'll go ahead and click the pause button and come back later. Okay, the next screen we come up to here is where we choose the region, and the United States is my region. I'll click Yes. Up pops the US keyboard, so I will choose that. The next thing it wants to know is whether I want a second keyboard, which I do not, so I will click Skip. This screen may be confusing. Personal use or an organization? Well, it's probably pretty clear that you want to choose personal use here. If you choose an organization, what you will be doing would be setting up for either a domain account, which you don't have a domain most likely that you're on. You don't have a domain controller server running, or if you want to be on an Azure Active Directory domain, which is kind of a new thing with Microsoft. It's a subscription-based domain, and we are not using that. It's the same kind of subscription base that you use for Office 365, but some companies now allow you to use a version of Windows on a subscription basis. That's not what we want. We want a personal account. So let's go ahead and choose personal account and then Next. Now the next screen that comes up wants us to create or enter our Microsoft account. Now if you have a Microsoft account, that's great. You can create a Microsoft account here, but you don't have to do either one. If you use a Microsoft account, the nice thing is that you can log into your Microsoft account from any Windows computer that's online, and all of your settings will follow you, and your bookmarks will follow you, things like that. However, you can also use an offline account, which means it will not communicate with Windows at all. For purposes of this particular course and for this particular machine, this is just a test virtual machine. I do not want to use a Microsoft account, so I'm going to choose offline account down here. On the next screen that comes up is a little begging on the part of Microsoft. They are begging us, please use the Microsoft account, because if you do, look, you have all these things that will work as well. Well, I don't want them to beg. I'm just going to say no. I don't want the Microsoft account. So now it wants to know what local account name you want. I will choose Roger for this virtual machine, and of course a little bit more begging down here, or better, use an online account. Now it wants a password, so I'll give it a password. And again, a little begging down here. On the next screen, it wants me to confirm the password. And some more begging. Here it wants 3 security questions. Now I'm going to pause the video when I type the answers into this, because I use them for my own machine, so I don't want to give those away. But I will choose the first security question. What was your first pet's name? I'll pause the video while I enter this answer. Alright, now the second security question, so I'll go ahead and say, what city was I born in? And I'll pause the video. Finally, the third question, so I'll go ahead and choose, what was your childhood nickname? And I'll pause the video again. Alright, off it goes for some more setup. Do more cross devices with activity history. So, do I want this version of Windows to keep track of my history? And you can choose yes or no here, depending on whether you want it to maintain your history or not, or do you want more privacy and not maintain your history of where you go and what you do on this device. In this case, I'll select no. Now, what about the digital assistant, which is Cortana? Cortana is sort of the equivalent of say the Amazon Alexa and so on. I will go ahead and let it use Cortana in this case, but remember that it's going to keep track of lots of things that I do. Search history, typing history, handwriting patterns, and so on. So I will go ahead and say yes in this case, because I might want to use it to demonstrate Cortana later on, although I doubt it, but I will go ahead and accept it in this case. This is the telemetry data. What telemetry data means, what do I want Microsoft to be able to see? What information do I want my computer to send Microsoft. Do I want it to be able to keep track of my speech recognition? I will say no. Finding my device, I'll say no. It's a virtual after all. It's not even a real device. Inking and typing, I'll say no. Advertising ID, no. Tailored experiences, I'll say no. And diagnostic data, I'll say no. And location, I'll say no. So I will turn all of those off in this case and say accept. At this point, it's going to go through a number of screens, have some, these black screens and change to blue and all this kind of stuff. And this will take quite a long time, so I will go ahead and pause it again. Finally, the Edge browser opens up, and in this case, it didn't actually find the site that it was looking for, but I'm going to go ahead and close the Edge browser in this case. And there I am, up and ready to go. Now I can check the version number if I want to. I'm just going to go ahead and type WinVer in here. WinVer, and we will see that I am now running the 1903 version, and that this is Microsoft Windows 10 Pro. Now I can't see in this that I'm using a trial version of this. I could do that using the Slmgr command, so I'm going to open the command line and type Slmgr, which is Software License Manager, and then DLI for Display License Information. And up will pop, we hope. There we go, some information says yes, I'm using the professional version. This is the retail version. It gives me the last partial product key down here, and it says that the licensing status is notification, which means it is not an activated copy. In other words, I will get notifications later on in the version of a watermark down here telling me that this is not a licensed version. However, I can continue to use this on and on for a long time. The only thing I can't do, though, is I can't update things and I can't personalize things. In fact, if I go to the settings here and go to personalization, once this comes up, personalization, I should get a message that says you need to activate Windows before you can personalize your PC. So there we have it. We have a running version of Windows 10 that we can use throughout the course. Now, this is good for 30 days and before the trial expires. However, I can then type Slmgr and then a space and a slash and rearm, and that will give me another 30 days. I can do that up to 3 times for a total of 120 days of time on my trial. That's it for this video. Thank you.